Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is comedian Sarah Bennetto. Born in Melbourne, lives in London, she's performed throughout the UK and Australia, including Melbourne's Comedy Festival, Edinburgh's Fringe Festival, and her shows are fascinating. For example, depicting the true story of a lunch with Prince Charles and a not-so-true live staging of her own funeral. She also hosts a radio show called Sarah Bennetto's Mixtape. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Peter. Nice to be here.
And fans of the podcast should know that we're taping this in a library.
Now, as we are that rock and roll, that's what we're about.
So apologies for the background noise. Sarah, if you weren't doing comedy, what would you be doing?
I really enjoy music radio, and I have one foot in that camp. So I feel like if it all went kaput for comedy, that I would just ease my way into music radio.
Okay. So you'd be a DJ?
Yeah. I love it. I could talk about music endlessly. Live gigs, records, rock stars, all of that. I love it.
And how'd you get into music?
From a very young age, I went to see live shows, and all through a British band called The Cure. I remember staying up late to watch an Australian music video TV show called Rage, which is like pivotal to any Australian indie kids kind of musical schooling, I suppose, upbringing. And it was a back-to-back collection of songs by The Cure, music videos by The Cure. And from there, I just fell in love with that band. And then I started getting into other bands that are sort of contemporaries of The Cure. So New Order, Depeche Mode, stuff like that. And then anything contemporary that had, I suppose, been influenced by that scene, that Britpop scene, that new romantic scene. And then from the age that I could start going to live shows, I started going to live shows.
What age is that?
Probably here it's 18, but I was going at 16 with like an older friend or a relative or whatever.
A fake ID.
Yeah, but if my mom and dad are listening to this, no, I still haven't been to a live gig. What are you talking about? Never had alcohol or anything worse than that. That's my life. I love it.
You know, I once spent like a month 3 weeks in Estonia, and there's a Depeche Mode bar in Estonia.
What?
So put that on your list.
That's so niche. Oh my God, amazing.
And they play Depeche Mode all the time.
I mean, I love Depeche Mode, but I really feel for the stuff in that bar. Wow. Okay. I mean, that's funny because now I've met a lot of these people, my heroes, my musical heroes, through the work that I do. So I host a backstage show at Glastonbury Festival every year, which is an incredible event, like a week long. I'm camped backstage with the bands and interviewing them and going to see their headline sets later that night. It's amazing. And I also curate the comedy stage at a music festival every year, and I have done so for 13 years now.
Which one's that?
End of the Road Festival, which is named after a Bob Dylan song, not a Backstreet Boys song. Okay. And we get the best comedians you'll ever see playing every year, and bands as well. Flaming Lips, David Byrne, all that kind of stuff. So that's been great for meeting my heroes and, and always making a klutz out of myself in front of them, I wish I could say I'm like a stylish, gracious, or graceful lady, but, I am who I am.
Well, first of all, I disagree. We walked throughout the streets of Melbourne trying to find this place, and that was the one lacking grace.
Yeah, well, we had a lovely time, and this building is gorgeous. Art Deco, Art Nouveau. If you're listening to the podcast, Google the Brunswick Library, and you tell us.
Yes, on Sydney Road in Dalston.
Yeah.
By the way, have you seen this movie, 24-Hour Party People?
Yes, I have. About the Madchester scene, they call it. Yeah. It's great. Yeah.
It's a fabulous Steve Coogan.
And
there's the fourth wall in the movie.
Yes, that's true. And also, I believe there's another comic, Simon Pegg is in it.
Okay.
He has a cameo. Comics cross over a lot into the music world and into the film world. Very clearly film world. People know that. But I think, comics are very useful in lots of realms. We never say no. That's both a problem and a blessing. Yes, exactly. And there's a lot we can draw upon, I think.
Do you think that's a problem that comics don't say no?
It can be.
Does it get? This is an issue that I have is that people think they don't have to pay comics.
Yeah, it depends on the scene. It depends where you are. And I know that America, that is a big problem. Mm-hmm. There's a different understanding that stand-up comedy is a means to an end, people are perfecting their 3 to 5 minute routines in the live clubs so that they can end up writing for Conan, Letterman, whatever. So to get off the circuit, really. Whereas in the UK, I pay my rent, people buy houses on just live stand-up alone. That's their life, their career. It's a really good, income, mm-hmm. and it's a viable career. Yeah, because if you're pro, you get paid. That's how it's seen. Maybe on the open mic circuit, you might gig for free for 1 or 2 years while you're still new. Mm-hmm. And then you work your way up to what we call middle bracket as a stand-up, where you're polishing a 15-minute set. And the second you hit 20 minutes of reliable stand-up that promoters have seen you do, they're like, yep, she can do the clubs. So it's kind of the magic number is 20. They talk about your tight 20. Yes. Or 30 minutes if you're doing an extended set. I did a club in Tasmania the other night and I did 45. That's because they know that I can, because I've done something 7, depending on how you look at it, 7 to 10 solo shows at the Edinburgh Fringe, Melbourne-born Festival, Perth and Adelaide Fringes, all of those. So they know she's got a 1 hour show. Yeah, many 1 hour shows. She can draw upon that to do an extended set at our club. So once you're there, you're up and running, really. The understanding here is if you're doing 20s, you're getting paid in the Melbourne, the Australian scene. But there are fewer gigs because just of sheer population difference between here and the UK. So you've also got to fly around a lot more. If you get on the university circuit in Australia, it's like the college circuit in the States. You're flying always. Okay. You're staying in tiny, crappy motels, but you're earning,
So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about being on the road? And
it's tough. It's different for women too. Safety is an issue. Mm-hmm. And there's things that have come up in our industry, certainly at the point of recording this, that are now being exposed, I suppose, what it's like for being a stand-up who happens to be female is hard, man. Dodgy promoters, sleazy other fellow comedians, safety, getting home from shows late at night alone, staying in hotels alone. I know of lots of my contemporaries who've had fellow male comics or bookers come into the hotel room late at night, drunk, hey, we should, get out, and you kind of just have to laugh it off, or what are your options? Not do that gig again. And that is obviously hopefully going to change. But, it's an interesting life. I don't think it's conducive necessarily to having stability or a family or even sometimes financial security, because you take a lot of personal financial risk. It's not conducive to holding down a relationship.
Right.
Yeah. I dated another comic for many, many years, and that seemed to work, because sometimes we would tour together, never be on stage together, but we might do the same club in the same night.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
I think I think it's more than interesting. I think it's super hard when you look at it from the outside. You're looking at anyone trying to make it on the road, and then for the issues you just described as a woman, what's interesting is people will often make an argument that women aren't as funny as men, and they'll point to the professional ranks as evidence of that. I've always chafed at that idea, because it's like saying that women can't do medicine as well as men. It's
weird, isn't it? It's really weird. If you were to say something like redheaded people can't do medicine or law, it would be well, you're clearly a lunatic, because that cannot be based in fact or science. I mean, it's about exposure, visibility. That's the problem. There was a really controversial policy put in by the BBC in the UK a few years ago that, there's a whole, I'm not sure if this is a thing in the States, but TV comedy panel shows are massive. And everyone always says, the money's in formats. Like, people who come up with an idea for a new funny quiz show for the TV, they make millions, right? And so what they would tend to have is an all-white male panel. And everyone's like, oh my God, that guy's so hilarious, and I love, and of course they are really funny. These are stand-ups generally, or comedy writers that have earned their chops learning how to do this off camera, and then you put them on camera, and of course they're brilliant, and they often all know each other, so there's like a repartee between them that is hilarious. And what they used to do was plonk in a very pretty model or TV presenter who happened to be a girl, and that would be our representation. Right. And she would be daunted, intimidated, wouldn't know the other guys, so she didn't have that relaxed banter with them. She wouldn't disrespect them in a funny way. She would be like well-mannered and reserved. And then people watch that show, and damn, all women because of her. All of us represent. But if one of those male comics had a bad gig or didn't say much, you wouldn't say, men aren't funny. You would say, that guy isn't funny. So it's really disappointing that we have to be represented by one woman on a panel. So recently they put in this policy that on all TV comedy shows, because it's such a booming type of show in the UK and in Australia, I think, they would say, they put in this policy, there must be at least one woman. But again, that just meant, it had just ensured that there would be one woman, not one female comic. So the once in a while they have a stand-up who's a woman on it, and some examples are Roisin Connerty, Catherine Ryan, some really fantastic British comics, Canadian comics, whatever. They would rock it, and people would be like, except for her, she's pretty good. So you would get comments like, I don't normally like female comedians, but you're good. And that is not a compliment to those people. I get that after some shows. I don't normally like women, and you're like, then you haven't seen enough. You haven't seen enough, because we're out there. We may not be visible, but look, the more that we push through, the more that people will get favourite female comics. Or I like that one-liner female comic. Or I obviously disagree with the term female comic to start with. And I feel like if people insist on using it, then I will use the term male comic, which I think is really fun. This is Larry. He's a great male comedian friend of mine.
What a good male comedian.
I don't normally like male comedians. So I think the more we're out there and the more, because we're learning hard on the circuit. We do these live shows where it is sometimes brutal, sometimes fun, drunken, whatever. You don't know what you're going to get. If you become an all-weather stand-up comic on the live circuit, you're unstoppable. So you put us on panel shows and we can do it. We can do it as well as the men. We can, what they say in the UK, we can take the piss out of the men, we can take the mickey out of them, and we can play with them, and it's really fun watching people who are ready for it doing it.
Yeah, the issue is, this is coming up at universities. So, I teach a marketing management class, and we get teams, and there's debates with how to create a team structure, which is similar to creating a panel structure. And the question is, do you want diverse representation? So across all the groups, do you want to have, for instance, at least one woman? To have at least some diversity in the group, so you don't have a group of all men, because the classes tend to skew men. Or do you want to have an ally structure, which is you never have one woman in a group. You have
several,
two or more.
Yeah.
And so you would be willing to forego diversity within a group in order to have a scenario where
there's more. I think it's more comfortable for that. For any other group, let's say that person of colour, disability, or women. Isn't it funny? We're 51% of the population, and we're never represented in that way on TV. We're represented like we're a minority, which is so interesting, which is why we do need lifting up, I think, because we're not even at halfway yet, and we're more than half of the population. But I think, obviously, for example, on panel shows, when there's a few women, especially who know each other from the circuit or know the men as well, boy, it lifts everyone's game. And you can see, wow, they're really sparring at a level that they are contemporaries of those men, on screen. And I think there's a comedy panel show podcast that I'm a regular sort of team captain on called Global Pillage. I think their Twitter handle is just @Global Pillage. And it is a podcast, and the idea behind it was, what if rather than having one person of colour or one woman, to to like lift up the sort of diversity. What if rather than that was the exception, that's the rule? So all other type of people. And it is a fantastically funny podcast. And it doesn't necessarily say, oh, hey, have you noticed that the whole panel is women? Oh, hey, have you noticed that there's a person of colour? They just do it. Yes. And they have a funny format that is hilarious rounds and quizzes and, facts about history and the world. And it is funny in and of itself. And I think that is a really successful experiment. And therein talks about getting it, piloted for a radio show or a TV show. And I'm not surprised because it just proves that it's just as funny regardless of background. Maybe even more so because you're getting these interesting voices, different stories.
This is consistent. Well, I think throughout history, there's always bias and prejudice. And so then what happens is there's a structure built around that bias, and that structure reaffirms the bias.
Sure, yeah.
And so then whenever there's a change that allows true competition, meritocracy, you find out those biases are indeed biases. So the famous one is turning to blind auditions for symphonies. And, so at the time symphonies were all men, and the reason were, nearly all men, because it's like, well, only men can play the trombone,
Sure.
Only men can play these big instruments and so you put up a screen, you have people take their shoes off when they walk across the stage and perform behind the screen, and lo and behold,
women were getting through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was a time in the United States where all basketball players were white. You know what I mean? And it was because, non-white
as it should be, right?
So
it makes sense. So we just have a natural aptitude, right?
Yeah. So comedy, the gatekeepers are white men.
Sure. Literature, the canon, dead white men. Yeah.
Exactly. So I want to ask you a little bit about beyond stand-up comedy. So you do these fun shows. You do sketch.
Sure. Yep. Character. Yep.
And so tell me a little bit about that.
I think the Edinburgh Fringe every year is a wonderful testing ground for new ideas, and you can be really avant-garde with your 1 hour show. The understanding on that circuit, and I would include Australia on that circuit because they have the Melbourne Comedy Festival. It's called the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. It's amazing. Montreal as well. You are sort of expected to have a brand new hour of stand-up or whatever, right? Because what the award-winning shows are now doing is they're injecting like a narrative arc. So it'll be the true story of the time I went to the circus or whatever. It'll be like a collection of funny characters and there's like a moral to the story at the end. And it may not be that ham-fisted, but you know what I mean? You get this, I don't know, like an overarching idea of the performer's politics or MO, you know what I mean? So it's a great chance to express something a bit more than you would just get in a standard 20-minute club set, and hey, it'll still be funny. It'll still have setups and punchlines, but you can inject characters and ideas, avant-garde stuff. I played parlor games with my audience in my Edinburgh show 2 years ago. It was called Sarah Bennetto Fritters Away an Hour of Your Life, ... fritters. It's a long title. I enjoy a long title.
And a nice pun.
Bit of fun, yeah, exactly. I had so many people tweeting me about fritters that month, like pictures of fritters they'd found in cafes and stuff, and I'm like, that's great, thank you. Did not anticipate this. I had a lot of audiences leaving going, I was really disappointed you didn't talk about fritters. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm so sorry. But yeah.
Wanting more.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you grew up with a game called Wink Murder in the Dark.
No.
So it's like a kid's parlor game, really, where the parents would normally switch off all the lights in the room and then someone gets tapped on the shoulder by the parent to tell them that they're the murderer. And then the lights come back on and we all sit there and look around the room suspiciously and someone winks at you, that means you're dead. So I thought that'd be really fun and I found a way to make it work in a theatre. And I would set one audience member up to be the murderer and they had the rest of the show as I was doing stand-up on stage to kill off the audience. And that an audience member would have to put up their hand and say, Sarah, I'm dead. And it was so exciting. People were like, oh my God, it's going to be me next. They're looking suspiciously. And
if I see you winking at someone else, I'm like, you're the murderer.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a vote at the end. You get 3 guesses. I had a guy that killed the entire audience down to like 2 people maybe. And that normally it was 3 or 4 people. That was a pretty good hit rate.
Yeah.
I found in this experiment.
How big were these audiences?
Like a 70-seater theatre.
Okay.
But because and I had to have the seating in like an arc theatre style. This is the thing. People wouldn't think about like the way seating can impact on a show, but it had to be a certain way for my audience to be able to see each other and me, direct sight lines. So this guy, and he got everyone down to one. And so obviously if you've been killed by him, you know who it is. But the last 3 or 4, I think it was, did not know, and they were terrified. It was so funny. And at one point, I think it was the end, I said, okay, it's time. We're going to vote. Put your hand up if you think you know who the murderer is.
Okay.
And a lady put her hand up and said, oh, is it that lady? And she said, no. So now we know that lady's out. This lady's out. And of the 2 last people, I looked at the guy that I knew I'd picked as the murderer, and he looked at me and he put his hand up. And I was like, oh my God. Inside my head, I was thinking, there's no rule to say he can't. And I said, who do you think the murderer is, sir? And he said, is it that person over there? And I went, no. And so he won. He managed to eliminate everybody else. And then everyone was like, oh, when they screamed, they realized it was him. And he used his guess to throw the scent. Genius. It was pretty good. I played Scrabble, name scoring with the audience, all sorts. Every year you just the joy about writing a new Edinburgh Fringe show and then touring it to the other festivals as well is that you can do anything with that hour. It's yours. So you can be as crazy or as straight as you want.
And the audience expects it.
Yeah, you see a lot of, exactly. The audience are up for it. They want you to use the full 60 minutes of that hour. And you can be as interactive or as immersive as you want. A lot of people do set up, punch for 1 hour, which is long. Like if they're doing puns, like for 1 hour, oh my God.
Yeah, that's a lot.
One-liners, but it can be really incredible if they pull it off. But a lot of the award winners have gone on to be film stars and whatever, like just birthing these ideas that show their full skill set.
And is that you? Is that going to be you?
Sure, yeah. I mean,
of course.
This podcast is timeless. So by the time you're listening to this, I want to thank you all for my Academy Awards, for my Grammys. Weird that I went into music as well. Emmys. It was lovely.
Tony Awards you're going to do for your
Sure, yeah. Tony Awards, Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Prize.
You're lucky to be here.
Yeah, you should be. You're privileged, yeah.
So these are clearly really creative ideas. How do you come up with these things? Like, do you have, besides just supreme talent?
Excuse me, thank you. I just tested you to see if you'd say bless me, and you did, thank you.
Do you have, methods, tricks? Do you have,
You're always looking, like in your waking life, on the way to a show, on a train, on a way to a festival, when you're hanging out with friends, when you're watching people in a cafe. There's a lot of people watching, and you're always open to ideas. So, there's a famous story about, and I'm just going to name these comedians because I think it's gorgeous and it's funny.
Sure.
And people can tweet them if they want to. But there's a wonderful British comedian, super posh, called Hal Cruttenden, and another comedian called Joe Ball. Now, Joe, after this happened, was driving me to a show in Brighton, and he said, the last time I drove to this show, I was driving Hal Cruttenden. And I said, I love Hal Cruttenden. And Joe said, yeah, he's great. This funny thing happened. We were talking about, global terrorism and, the dark side of that. And, it's horrible, isn't it? And I said, of course. And he said, I was talking about something I never normally disclose, that my girlfriend at the time and myself were involved in the attacks on London, 7/7. On the tube, there were bombings, and on the buses, there were bombings. And I went through this, Hal kind of teased it out of me, and I didn't really feel comfortable talking about it. I said, Hal, I don't really talk about it. And he said, no, tell me, that's really horrible. And he went through the whole story about how his girlfriend is a nurse and she jumped off the bus when they saw the one in front of them explode, and she ran and she started treating people. And as he got off the bus, he said he was partially deaf temporarily at the time, and he was terrified, and he said there were body parts all over the road.
Okay.
And he was frozen, but he was inspired by how ready she was to help and to act. And she looked at him and she just started pointing because she knew that in this part of London, Farringdon? No, I want to say. Anyway, she knew that there was a medical school just there, and she said, go in there and get anyone you can to come out and help, student doctors, nurses. And he said, okay. So he ran in there, and he said, I'll never really get over it. And he said at that moment, he was telling the story, this silence fell over the car, and Hal Cruttenden went, oh, you lucky, lucky bastard. And Joe went, what? He goes, oh, there's an Edinburgh show in that. That's what comics are like. It is so terrible. Morally bankrupt. Like, you lucky bastard. So actually the joke, because all comics I know that I perform with, we know that Hal Gruttenden's story. And so whenever something bad happens, you spill over, you drop your coffee, you look at your friend and go, you lucky bastard.
So the idea is that nothing...
They say nothing's off limits. I don't know.
Oh yeah, but what you're saying is you're on the lookout all the time.
Sure. Yep. And actually, I think you're mining your life. Mm-hmm. And also, it's not just about like plundering it for gags. It's not that cheap. I think it's about plundering it for understanding. Mm-hmm. Like, you're trying to understand, like all of us, you're trying to use your art form to understand life. If that doesn't sound too grandiose.
I don't think so at all.
But you're trying to like make sense of this mess.
So that's one step though, right? Because
sure.
I can pay attention to my life all the time and then create a bunch of stuff that's really boring and unoriginal and not funny.
Yeah, and I
so
suppose...
what is it that makes... So how do you twist it? Do you turn it?
I suppose...
Flip it? What is going on there when you take this thing that you've noticed?
I suppose you're looking for the humour in life. And if it is dark aspects or strange aspects... It is sometimes beneficial to laugh at these things, sometimes therapeutic to push through and go, wow, that was a particularly weird or dark time in my life, or I can't believe I made it, or like the peculiarities of hard and strange times where all this is going on and yet a bird pooed on your head or something, okay, these are terrible examples. I'm workshopping here, but, it's about catharsis, I suppose, about, we're aware of all these horrible things, and yet isn't it all stupid? Isn't this, and I suppose it's not just looking at grandiose stuff, but the minutiae of life, how silly these little things are, foibles.
You're being so polite that we're in a library right now.
Really? Am I? Oh, like dropping my voice?
Yes, because that's the kids that left.
All right, yeah, we drove them out. You should have heard what we were talking about before this podcast. Woo, blue. Do you have that term in the States? Blue? A bit of blue?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I usually ask my comedians to be PG-13.
Oh, really? Okay, that's fine. I'm pretty good.
You can even take it up a little bit.
I do shows for adults, and I'll definitely pepper it with the odd F word here or there. Not pepper it, let's just say a light seasoning. But maybe at the beginning and the end, we don't know. There'll be 2 grains of, But actually, I get booked to do like there's a whole children's comedy circuit, like pro gigs in theatres. And sometimes the industry's booming. So sometimes the shows will be 600-seater theatres in Newcastle, in Sheffield, in London. So that is a whole different way of thinking about comedy.
So I've never heard of this. So it's like a comedy show for children.
Well, there's a few different clubs over there, but the chain that I do that are probably the first and the best, I think I love them, they're called Comedy Club for Kids, with the number 4 kids. And they tour all around. It's huge business. So it's like parents bring out their little kids, anything from toddlers up to, 14, 15. They've published a book on how to do stand-up comedy, and they give it out to the kids. If the kids want to know, maybe when I grow up, I'd like to be a stand-up, and it's got some tips. Don't steal material from other comedians. Write your own jokes. Never punch down, always punch up. Just introducing kids to that. I think they're great.
All the things that the adults should be doing.
Exactly. And also, girls can be as funny as boys, blah, blah, blah. And I also think great rules for life. Not punching down is a great rule for life. Yes, and is a great rule for life. Being able to laugh at yourself is a great rule for life. And you'll often, sometimes if someone's been patronising or mean to you, a great way to win or come back from that and show like reserve and poise is to yes and them. Go, sure, I am a butthead, like you say, but I'm a great butthead, or, whatever it is. But I think if you can laugh at yourself, you win.
So this idea of being nice as a comedian, tell me. Rules in life, right?
I don't know about being nice. I think there's certain people we don't have to be nice about. Certain politicians, exactly. The patriarchy. I don't particularly need to be nice to the patriarchy. Do you know we went to a feminist gig last night, my sister and my mum and I, and we had a really tight turnaround to try and make this show. It was a free community show in honour of Adela Pankhurst, who is the daughter of Emmeline Pankhurst, the very famous British suffragette who got us the vote, right? So Emmeline threw herself under the King's horse, died, and then a few years later we got the vote. Okay. That's what it took, right? sort of extreme acts like that. And then her daughter, Adela, survived. She had daughters, but she moved to Australia, and she led the suffragette movement out here with other women like Vida Goldstein, etc. So we went to a show which was in honour of 100 years exactly to the date that Adela Pankhurst was imprisoned for political activities and trying to fight conscription for men in World War One. Okay. Anyway, as we walked into this show last night, it had just begun because my mum and I had been coming from a ferry to get across town, and we thought it was still worth going to. We would slip in, and there was a man on the door, and he was greeting two lovely elderly women who came in before us, and I heard him say to them, "Oh, nice of you to turn up on time," really like sarcastically, really passive-aggressively. And you don't know those ladies' stories. They were obviously embarrassed about being late, but you don't know if they had childcare issues. You don't know if they were ill or they had trouble finding a park, whatever their story is. And certainly for us, this was the only time we could arrive or we didn't get to go at all. And it wasn't going to interrupt the performance. Anyway, I heard him say that to those women, and they were all like, "Oh, God, oh, sorry, sir, sorry." And he was like, "Oh, go on in. You've missed half of it. Go on in anyway." And they were like, "Oh, gosh." And then he got to us. And he said that to my mum and my sister and I. I heard him use the same line. So this is clearly what he'd been doing to women all night. He was enjoying it. Yeah, he said he'd tried his little line on us. "Oh, nice of you to turn up on time. You've missed half the show." And I just looked at him and I went, "Ha," and then walked in. And my sister was like, "Oh, burn." It was so good. No one speaks to my mum like that. I mean, it's a feminist gig celebrating the suffragettes. Are you serious? Are you going to stand on the door greeting women in a passive-aggressive way? It was like the worst time he chose to do that. It was great fun. I really enjoyed it. I don't mind. You don't have to be nice all the time. Yeah. But I think you need to know the enemy. And I think it's important that, there's a community, we're helping each other, blah, blah, blah. But I think the time for being doormats is over. Yeah. I'm done. I'm past the point of worrying about, mollycoddling, pandering to people. I'm a fair person. I'm a warm and kind person, but I'm tired.
Yeah. I don't blame you. These are politically, in the United States, obviously, this stuff is coming out.
Yeah.
And it's just going to continue, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And people like being able to get away with murder because of their place, their position is pretty bad. Because they feel like they're admired. That Louis C.K. apology, the word admiration appears something like 4 times in it. I know that you admired me, and thus I exploited your admiration for me. Like, please. He, somehow flatters himself throughout that whole apology. I mean, that may or may not have been true, but it's not for you to say. It's for your audience to say, "I admire you." Let them say it at least. Lord.
Yeah, I think this, I know there was just a thing in Twitter between Dan Harmon and his writers that was very public. It's
interesting.
And I think this, obviously the world of comedy, the world of entertainment, the world of politics, I think it's just going to continue to grow.
I mean, if you're an ally right now, everyone has to be careful and everyone has to think, we're all guilty in some way. We're all complicit, Every time I've laughed off advances of a booker or a promoter or a fellow comedian or found a way of dealing with it that was palatable to the patriarchy, I kind of let the team down. But equally, some of the women who challenged were never booked again or were considered like hard work. And it'll be great when we're free of that bullshit. I think it's terrible. I can't remember what I was going to say. Go on, edit.
No, that's fine. So I want to ask you, what you're doing a children's comedy show.
Sure.
That's what we were chatting about.
Yeah.
What's your opener?
Okay, well, here's the thing.
Children?
Structurally and technically, it's totally different. So kids don't have the attention span of adults. You could not do a 1-hour show like your Edinburgh Fringe. Okay. What they do is they run a club format when normally pro acts would be doing 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
The kids' comedy circuit, the bookers get you to do 10. That's pro, right? Because the kids have about that much attention span. And then they quickly change it and there's a new act who's different, different to look at and whatever. Different tone and speed and whatever. But so you're doing a pro 10-minute act, and it isn't as easy as just taking the swear words out of a pre-existing routine. Because you'll find that most of your routines, when you sit down and think about it, are not stuff that kids would care about, like living in a flat share or being at university or this annoying guy at work or whatever. Like, that isn't of interest to kids. I tell you what really works: butts and farts. or Trumps, as they call them in the UK. Isn't that great? Did you know that that's what Trump means?
No.
It means it's a polite kid's way of saying fart.
Oh,
yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. But yeah, they love that stuff. You could talk about that, but they like movement, shapes, colours, voices.
Okay.
They like sound effects. But that works right across to the adult club circuit. If you were to say, like, report speech, like, and then my mum said to me, hey, pass me that jar, people would be like, sure, okay, cool. But you're missing an opportunity there, because if you ever say, it just lifts a performance in a stand-up club for kids or adults if you say, and then my mum said, pass me that jar. Like, people just all of a sudden go, okay, that's funnier. Like, and it's unconscious. An audience won't know, but they love you more for it. Okay, that is not one of my punchlines. Pass me that jar. I should just make that very clear to listeners of your podcast. You can definitely still see me live. If in fact you do like it, I will do the jar routine, which I will invent for you.
Then do you find yourself practicing? Do you find yourself, for instance, if that really was a punchline?
Sure.
Are you consciously changing that? Your intonation and the
yeah, for sure. It's so boring, the behind the scenes stuff, behind the curtain stuff, but you will do loads of new material nights in London, in Melbourne, wherever you are, where you don't mind not getting paid because you're given 10 minutes normally, and there's a cavalcade of pro acts doing 10 minutes at that night to polish up new ideas for their pro set. So, and also it'll be probably a club run by a comedian, like, so they know the form, they know how to make it work best, and they will make it nice, like a lovely, safe environment of fun, muck about or fuck about. There you go, you have to edit that one, Peter, haha. It'll be like that kind of environment. It'd be fun. All the acts will be having a few drinks, be chatting to the audience, very workshoppy. And you'll develop these ideas and develop them over a series of weeks or months till they're ready to go in your pro set. And it'll be stuff like subtleties, like I changed an and to a the, or an or to a but. And it'll be the emphasis you put on not just a word, but a syllable in a word can change, you know. And it'll totally lift the joke or take it in a different direction.
So you have a lot going on.
Yeah.
Right, clearly. That's clear to me.
Yeah.
A lot going on. And so, a lot of comedians, they seem from the outside to have a leisurely life. You know, they kind of, I don't know the right, I mean, it doesn't, it's not obvious that this stuff is happening in the background, right? So when outsiders sees
the comic sitting in a cafe with a laptop, drinking a coffee, feet up.
Yeah, and they, you work an hour a day.
And you have a drink while you're at work, yeah.
Exactly. So tell me about your days. What is going on in a kind of typical day?
Well, the first thing is that there's no typical day. You're always on the road. So you might wake up in Tasmania, Victoria, the UK, wherever. You might be at a festival where every night for 30 nights, because the big pro festivals, Edinburgh Fringe, Melbourne Comedy Festival, Montreal, whatever, they tend to be, if you're doing the full run, a 1 month long festival. And you are booked by a theatre to do your show at 7:30 p.m, that's prime time, or 8 p.m, whatever, every single night for 30 nights. So you're going quietly mad. You wake up in a flat that you've privately rented with maybe 4 of your colleagues to stay up in Edinburgh for the whole month. And you go out, you do club sets, you do chat shows, you're booked to do appearances on podcasts or late shows to promote your solo show. Then you go to your solo show, and if you've been doing it right, it's packed out every night. And then the same words every night for 30 nights. How can you not go crazy? All comedians are a little bit bonkers. But when I'm on tour, so for example, right now I'm in Melbourne, Australia, where I'm chatting to you.
Yes, on international people.
Yeah.
It's the first international version of this podcast.
And perhaps we'll meet again and reprise this in London, who can say. But when I have any type of normality, so I'm at home in London, I'm at home in Melbourne, I find for me, I'm at an age and a point with my career where I really want routine. I want early mornings. I want writing throughout the day. I want any meetings to happen throughout the day, and then an evening show or writing or meetings or whatever. But for me, I like to see the daylight. I think it's really good for mental health, and it's good to feel like you've got some control over your waking life and interaction with human beings. A lot of comics, we disappear into the shadows. We stay at home, we write, we're only up at the night time, and it can be really, really unhealthy, I think. And you get this sort of, the malaise of the artist. It's true. It's the same as an unemployed person or a student. If you can really sink So for me, it's really important to be also swimming is my form of fitness. That's right. So if I can swim every day for 40 minutes, then I'm on the right track. And not just for like toning up reasons, but for mental health stuff. And just I find swimming very meditative. Maybe 10 minutes into my swim, I realize my brain's turned off and I'm in this kind of Zen state where like, I might be like, oh, I'm thinking about this email that's been troubling me. How do I respond to that problematic producer, agent, whatever it is? Oh, of course, I can just say this. There's the solution. Oh, exactly. I shall not name. I shan't. But solutions like rise to the surface when I'm swimming, and I think that's really useful. And sometimes comedy, like lines, just emerge. Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, that's how to say that punchline.
The pool and write these down?
Yeah, totally. I have, for me, my methods are I've moved to electronic. Okay. My entire gig calendar is on my iPhone, and I use the little microphone emoji in front of the address and the address and the name of the club. For every single club, I have the microphone emoji. So that way, when I go back and I'm doing my tax return at the end of every year, I can just look up the microphone emoji and see where I was on any given date, which theatre around the country or world. But I also have iPhone notes where I have ideas. And I can tell you right now that I have some that are...
tell me, what are you working on right now?
Well, right now, let's go through some undeveloped ideas that I think there is potential, and your listeners will probably steal them. I've got written here, mums love iPads. I think that's true. Does your mum love iPads? You know, aunties, like older ladies, just freaking love iPads.
Okay, I've not noticed that.
Okay, well, I have noticed that.
But why? And so what do you do with that idea?
Well, I'm thinking that there's something that might form part of a joke, where it's just a throwaway when I'm maybe doing a funny routine about my mum and I might make mention of the fact she's on her iPad. Because of course she's on her iPad. Mums are always on their iPad. And I feel like there'd be a percentage of the audience who would go, yes, and put their hands up, be like, oh my God, my mum too. Okay. I've also got here waterbeds. That's it. I think that there's something about waterbeds. What happened to them? Where are they? Yeah, is there like a refuse dump for waterbeds? Pestle and mortar. I just think that's funny. You know, like the grindy. Stuff, yeah, but also like people, my sister makes her own pesto. Oh my God. Like who makes their own pesto? My sister. At one point I wrote in this because it was a throwaway in a routine I did on stage about accidentally finding my brother on Tinder. Oh, gross. And I said that I deleted the Tinder app, reset my phone and kicked it into a volcano. So I've just written here, kick it into a volcano, because I thought that was a funny turn of phrase. Terrible.
Is it okay to still do Tinder jokes? Or
no, it's actually, the moment is past. But also, like, here's where it's handy. If I'm comparing and it has come up, or someone in the audience, like if you're bantering and chatting to an audience and they're like, oh, we met on Tinder, I'll be like, oh, and I could just quickly insert that as a throwaway. Yes. But I feel like dating app material is pretty tired. But it's okay to use it. There's some people who have some brilliant stuff about it.
Older, I feel that marijuana jokes are tired.
Yeah, man. Same here, same in the States. And it's always like a young man, and they'll always be doing jokes about getting caught masturbating by their mum. Like that's a big new male act thing to do, and they think they're the first. Yeah. And then my mum walked in, it's like a pullback and reveal, we call it. There's some famous comedians, Lee and Herring, that had a TV show, Stuart Lee and Richard Herring in the UK. And they had a recurring sketch on the TV show that would end with, and then I got off the bus. Like, you know, it was a weird scenario. This man was doing this horrible thing. And then I got implying that it was the bus driver or he was doing something on the bus. Oh, my God. It's just like a pullback and reveal. Kerchief, like handkerchief. I thought that was a funny word. Yeah.
So you're skilled with language. Like that's obvious just listening to you. I mean, it's not just...
Are you calling me a nerd? Is that what you're doing, Peter? I have an English degree from the University of Melbourne, where you're currently working.
That's not...
Yeah, film and English. Super useful. Right. According to my parents. No, they're being really supportive.
No, you have a grasp of language. That's clear to me. It's not just that you have this great accent, and it's not just that you have different words than I'm used to hearing, but you can use language well.
I enjoy it. I genuinely am a word nerd. Okay. My favorite board game, and already just opening a sentence with my favorite board game is pretty nerdy, but it's Scrabble. And I play other comedians internationally on Scrabble.
I see.
Right now, there's a comedian on here right now, Janet McLeod. She's in Melbourne. Richard Osman, he is in London.
I'm going to interview Janet.
Are
She's
you?
on the schedule.
Oh my God, she's fantastic. Say hello from Sarah Bennetto. I love her. She painted my toenails.
Oh,
that's Janet McLeod. Well, feel free to mention that. Yeah, they're sparkly. She's led an interesting life too.
She's like sort of like a thing here.
Yeah, like she ran the Cult Comedy Club when I was at university and graduating and starting to go see a lot of comedy.
Okay.
She ran a club called the Prince Pat, and that was the big alternative comedy club.
Okay.
And she had anyone she wanted she could get. She would host the show, and she was really good. She's not hosting so much, but she was one of the best, like, alternative comics at the time. And also, watching her host a show and be on the stage with the Doug Anthony All-Stars, with Dave Hughes, with Dave O'Neill, all these big Aussie stand-up comics.
Tim Ferguson.
Fantastic. Did he? He's great, yeah. They were heroes of mine. Watching her at the helm of that show made me think, oh, I can do it too. Like, we're allowed. Women are allowed. And I knew at that point, like, I'd be years off going pro like that, but it really encouraged me. And now she's a dear friend of mine and a real inspiration.
And you play Scrabble against her.
I do, and currently I'm winning, but that will not always be the case. She's good.
I see.
And you don't want to leave a triple open because she'll take it.
So you studied English.
And film, yeah. Bachelor of Arts at the University of Melbourne, and then honours. I actually had a car accident halfway through my honours year, and I had to do it over 2 years. So I did the coursework from my hospital bed.
Okay.
It was a pretty serious car accident. I was in there for 2-3 months,
Oh, wow.
and then back home, but with modified house. So there's a company here called, a governmental organisation called the TAC, Traffic Accident Commission. And they're really unique to Australia. They're famous to my British friends as well who come and do the Melbourne Comedy Festival. If they put on the TV here, they see these TAC ads.
Yeah.
They are horrific. But it really drills in, don't take your eyes off the road for a second, don't drink and drive. They're incredible because they have impacted on people. And, you do think about those TAC ads when you're driving and you take any risk. You just don't anymore. But the TAC are a fund that pay for you after you've been in a huge incident like that. They covered everything, and I feel like one day I'd love to shine a light on that, pay back what was done for me. We have universal healthcare here too, Medicare. In the UK we have NHS, and those systems struggle because we have fairly right-wing governments at the moment that aren't funding them enough.
Okay.
But they are still there. So if you need basic healthcare, you have it, and they're things to be celebrated. But I did all my coursework from my hospital bed while I was learning how to walk again.
Okay.
And then once I was back at home in this modified house that the TAC paid for, so bars everywhere up the stairs and assistant chairs and stuff, it was amazing. Then I wrote my thesis over the next year from home, and that was a manuscript for a book. I've always had a love of writing.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to ask you something I ask everybody about. What happened in the book?
Well, it was probably a novella in length.
Okay.
I want to say 40,000 words. And I think novels are 70. I don't know. Someone will correct us. 100,000. Who knows? It's good, actually. But I was on a lot of morphine. And when I've been back since and reread it, it's good. It's really good. I got a killer mark. But I was heavily drugged at the time on pethidine and morphine. So it was, it's really out there. But nothing ever. You can get your university manuscripts published, but I didn't even know anything about how to approach publishers. But I believe then the university takes the profit of anything new because it's coursework. Yeah, so anything, but that can happen. A lot of my colleagues have been published in other fields, science or whatever. I've actually been in talks with an unnamed publisher, a biggie in the UK. We've had a couple of meetings. They're looking for female voices who are comic but don't mind talking about darker stuff.
Okay.
And we are at the coffee stage of meetings about potentially writing something for them.
Okay.
We'll see. I don't really need to take on anything more right now. And if I did that, I'd need to step aside. I'd need to free up some room in the calendar to do that. And I'd have to make some harsh decisions about what I want to pause on for a while to write a book.
I see. So back to the question.
Sorry.
No. I shouldn't have. I wanted to know. So what's the secret to success that everybody knows but no one can seem to do, or very few can seem to do? The obvious secret.
Confidence.
Okay.
Confidence and a belief in yourself in a way that's palatable to others. Like, there's so many arrogant stand-ups who are like, I'm incredible at this. And sometimes you're like, well, let the audience be the judge of that, But being able to learn, for me, it was a learning experience. Being able to say, I'd be good for that gig. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I'd be right to compare your show. Okay. Like oftentimes people will ask you, can you think of anyone for my gig? And I've watched so many of my contemporaries go, yeah, me. And I would always go, well, I mean, obviously I say to her, but how about Peter McGraw? Peter's great. I had coffee with Peter the other day. If you're too kind and well-mannered, empathetic, you will let others take the opportunities. But learning to stand up and put your hand up and say, yes, please. Like Amy Paula's book is called Yes, Please. And she goes into that whole thing about learning to put yourself forward and to accept offers when they're given to you. And I think also like a good improviser, those set of rules that improvisers use, yes, and blocking. Like someone who blocks is someone who shuts down a suggestion. Like, would you like a coffee? No. Or, like that's not following the idea through and seeing what's there, exploring the possibilities. I think yes and is a good rule for life.
Yes. This idea of confidence is an interesting one. I have this saying, I feel like I really took my career to the next level when I started to ask, why not me?
Yeah.
That was sort of my form of trying to create.
Because sometimes you're convincing yourself, not even others. Yeah. It's about going, I would be good. Yeah, why not me? For sure. And also on stage, if you're selling your material, because the writing is not even that important. I mean, it's important to me, it's important to all of us, but actually, some people have material that is thin, but their onstage persona is so hilarious and so confident and so unique that carries it. And I've heard people say it's 90% how you tell them and 10% what you've written. And I think that's true. And that's where I think confidence is equally important, is if you're on stage telling material like, this is going to work because you're not overtly saying it, but you look like you're in control. You look like you're unafraid. You're honest, but you're relaxed. Then the sky's the limit, I think.
And how are you doing on the confidence scale these days?
I'm pretty honest with myself, but I'm confident. I do a lot of new material on nights where you're allowed to make mistakes, so you're pretty chilled about making mistakes. Okay. And then you take that to the pro rooms and you're like, oh well, I've done this 3 or 4 times, and I know its fallibilities, so and its limitations. So if it goes wrong, here's what I would do. I've got a get out clause, And sometimes it's as simple as saying, well, that was new material, and the audience fair. She's being honest with us. Yeah. You could fail, but just how you handle it, isn't it? How you handle rejection, how you handle failure is a true test of your mettle.
Sarah, this is really great. I appreciate you doing it, especially under unusual circumstances.
Hey, I love it. Who wouldn't come to a library? I can see they've got music DVDs over here, and I can see New Order. I can see Twin Peaks, Talking Heads Once in a Lifetime. Oh my God, the whole collection. I can see Seal, I think, Van Morrison. It's great. No, this has been a lovely place to come and immerse ourselves in the world of literature and music and arts and talk about my weird art form. Can we call it that? Whatever.
It's fitting. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.